take a step back from the brink. Connor Powell has the latest from our Mideast newsroom. Connor.
Chris, the chances for a political solution to this ongoing peace or violence in Egypt appear to be fading as protests continue to grow in Egypt, as pro-Morsi supporters continue to take to the streets, and violence is erupting now. In an effort to clear the pro-Morsi Muslim Brotherhood supporters from the streets, the Egyptian military opened fire on peaceful demonstrations yesterday, killing at least 70 people, wounding hundreds more. Egypt's top military commander, General al-Sisi, called for supporters to take to the streets Friday to, quote, give him a mandate to tackle terrorism. His statement is widely understood as a request to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the second time the Egyptian army has used deadly force to try to clear out pro-Morsi supporters. The violence, though, is dividing the pro-military transitional government, with several members of the coalition really complaining and voicing concerns about the violence. And Chris, supporters of this military coup that took place about a month or so ago to remove President Morsi have justified it on the grounds that it would be used to remove and to add stability to the country. It appears to be doing just the opposite.
Connor Powell reporting. Connor, thanks for that. Time now to bring in our Sunday group. Britt Hume, Fox News senior political analyst. Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report, Nina Easton of Fortune Magazine, and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. So, a violent crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood across Egypt. Authorities now saying that they have launched an investigation of ousted President Morsi on charges of espionage or allegations of espionage and murder. Britt, how do you assess the situation and what is one of our closest allies?
It is a regular mess, Chris, no question about that. I think that the administration's position of ambiguity, at least, about whether this was a coup and the question of whether to cut off aid to the Egyptian military is probably the right course. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen over there, but I do think a couple of things. One is I think that the Morsi government was unpopular and he remains unpopular. The military, when it called for a protest to supporting it, got a pretty big response to that. I think the people, broadly speaking, are backing the military. The problem now is with this outbreak of violence and 70 or more people dead, is that you can open wounds that you can't heal, and that the hopes of reuniting this country are diminished by the day, and that is a disturbing prospect.
Amy, let's pick up on this question of the Obama administration. This week they made a gesture of modest disapproval by announcing that they're suspending the sale of 4 F-16 jet fighters to Egypt. On the other hand, they announced they're going ahead with military exercises with the Egyptian military. What's the message? Frankly, what's the Obama administration's policy towards Egypt?
Well, it goes back to what Britt's saying, which is I don't think we have much of a choice when it comes to foreign aid. You can make some little changes, like with the F-16, but at the end of the day, you have 3 problems here. The first is cutting off aid could destabilize the region even more than it already is, which is hard to believe, but is true. The aid program is also a real pillar of the relationship between Egypt and Israel, and certainly Israel's already letting the American government know that they would not be excited about the fact of moving away from aid to Egypt. And finally, it costs us money. When we've already made these contracts, the American government has made contracts with a lot of these defense contractors to supply these weapons and other military things, equipment. And bottom line is, when you cut that off, the American government still paying the bills for that. So it's not saving us any money to actually cut off that aid.
President Obama faces a real dilemma here because on the one hand, he didn't like the authoritarian government that Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood had set up in Egypt. On the other hand, Morsi was the democratically elected president of the country. So the authority now seems to be the military, a small group of generals, and the mob in the street. What's the president do here?
Well, the problem is tit-for-tat suppression and violence does not a democracy make. This is not a building block for a democracy, despite the public support that the army has. You have to think back to 1992 when the Algerian army canceled elections to prevent Islamists from taking over, and it plunged that country into a civil war, 10 years. And I think Secretary of State John Kerry was right when he said we need to step back from the brink. I mean, this the Muslim Brotherhood, and Morsi was elected with 52% of the vote. Muslim Brotherhood, for all of its authoritarian tendencies, all its horrendous things it did over the past year, it's not going away. And to be shooting protesters in the head, this investigation of Morsi, it divides the country. And I think on the question of foreign aid, it is time at least to use the foreign aid for some leverage, to say, look, we've got to move, you've got to unite this country, and you've got to move towards elections.
Juan, to Nina's point, Secretary Kerry was making precisely that point, that the military needs to reach out to the Muslim Brotherhood and find, and it's pretty hard when you're killing dozens of protesters, some basis for reconciliation. The people in charge and the regime in Egypt seem to have ignored that.
Well, it's hard to talk about reconciliation when it's the Islamists who are trying to expand their camp. That's what sparked this latest round of shooting and violence. And secondly, that their basic demand, Chris, is that Morsi be reinstated. That's what they want. And that's exactly what they're calling for, a reinstatement of a government that was failing, a government that had ruined the Egyptian economy, and they're saying he was legitimately elected and must be put back in place. Well, I think what you're then saying is Egypt then would be an Islamist state, that they're just going to go with Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, and I think the people of Egypt have rejected that. The military could not be doing what it's doing unless the people of Egypt had said clearly, we reject Morsi and the Islamists, and I think that, Nina rightly said, it looks like you're on the verge of civil war here, but how can you say to the military, how can the United States say to the military, oh, you guys ease up? If they ease up, they're giving in to the Islamists. I think when you deal with extremists, that's what you get.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to talk about something else, Britt, and that was a fascinating split inside the Republican Party over national security this week. The House narrowly blocked a measure that a lot of conservatives were supporting, which would have limited the ability of the government to do this kind of massive phone surveillance. And New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, went after Rand Paul on the question of setting limits on government surveillance. Take a look.
These esoteric intellectual debates, I want them to come to New Jersey and sit across from the widows and the orphans and have that conversation. And they won't, because that's a much tougher conversation to have.
Rand Paul responded saying there's nothing esoteric, using Christie's word, about constitutional rights of privacy.
This is a battle that is real within the Republican Party. It is a strong and deep disagreement between internationalists and those who some might even label isolationists. It's been going on for a long time. It has subsided for periods of time, and now it's back. The party's going to have this out. Whether Chris Christie's harsh approach to it, somewhat reflected in the piece you played, is the right way to start it or to get it underway, I don't know. But this is real, it's out there, and it's going to go forward.
Well, and the Tea Party wing of the party is clearly in the Rand Paul camp. I mean, if you're talking about where they stand, there's a new poll out. Pew did a poll out this week. 62% of Tea Party Republicans said they disapprove of the NSA program. So when you're talking about that battle within the party right now, Rand Paul's on that side.
All right. We have to take a break here, but when we come back,